A video on painting bears. First things first, I get asked what paints do I use. Have I got the lid? These are my paints that I bought. I'll leave a link below. If you click through, I get paid a little affiliate fee, not very much, but a little bit. But these are the paints I've got. These used to be really expensive when I was a kid. These weren't a lot at all. These were like 3 or 4 quid. They weren't very much at all. So that's my paints. My paintbrushes, you're going to need like a brush kind of like this if you're going to paint them black like I show you in the video. And then you need a couple of fine brushes like these. You need one that's kind of like a medium sized. Come on, focus. Nope. The tools I use, lots of kitchen roll. So whenever I dab paint, you can see the state of my stuff here. So I've got a jar of water, and as I'm painting, I tend to sort of go in the paint and then just wash off the excess like this. So you don't ever, you know, just go straight from the palette to the bear, because you could find either you've got too much paint or not enough paint or whatever's going on. So you need that. I have these acrylic pens. This gold one I use for doing stitching around suitcases. This black one I use for writing the wanted on voyage. The others I don't tend to use on this. They tend to be more of a rock cutting thing that I do, a rock painting thing I do. So you need that, you need brushes. That's it really. I mean, I use spray varnish at the end to seal them in. Oh, I use those brushes, I use those pens to do this on the pajama ones. So the red and the blacks, pretty convenient for doing that. I tried doing it with paint and it was just too hard. But yeah, so this video is very long. I promised a painting tutorial. Nowhere near as good as my brother is. My brother is amazing at these things, but I will do this as a start. So first thing we do is we put a black undercoat on. So that's what we're going for. Just a big old squidge of black acrylic. I happen to have like a big tube of it. They come from the art shop. Yeah, a couple of quid each. Arts and craft, I forgot what it's called. Anyway, the arts and craft shop. And they're like a couple of quid. And what you want to do with these is water down a bit, because you don't want it to be too thick, but not too thin either. And then we basically are just gonna, you know, make these all black. Now, the one thing I would say you don't paint black is anything that's going to be really light. So on the final bears, what we got, right? So he's got a jam pot there, and this label. I have found that if you paint them black, it's really tough to then get them back to white again. So I would say don't paint those, but everything else, black coat on it. So I've done all of those. Now you'll notice those two over the back are the pajama bears. They end up looking like that. Now I've not painted them black because they are mostly white, right? And it's very, very difficult to get those to come back to once you paint them dark. So we'll leave that alone. And these two, I'm not going to paint these ones black. I'm going to paint these more natively. We'll try a different technique on these, and we'll just compare the result at the end. One thing I've learned to do is paint the bases. Nothing special, just splash that black on there. The bases are really chalky, and when you're holding them later, that chalk tends to transfer to where you're painting. So I found if you put a bit of black on there, it just seems to seal it in. Nobody will ever see it. In fact, you find yourself multiple times, like dabbing over it, because it gets rubbed off and stuff, but it does make for a better hand grip. So yeah, there's all the bears. Even these ones I'm going to paint different style, I'll just do the base. But there we go. Forest of Paddingtons to be painted up. So after they've dried, that's what you get. I mean, the fact that it's a little bit patchy doesn't really matter. The other paint will cover it. But you find that's much easier to handle now. You don't have dust coming off it. That'll be easier to paint the orange when we want to come to it. And when we hold it like this, you won't get so much dust coming off the bottom. So that's where we need to get to. Next thing is start painting. And we paint from the bottom up for no particular reason other than you tend to hold the hat quite a lot. So painting the hat last makes sense. That means you can do it like that, and the hat is one of the last things you get to. Yeah. Now we want to get some colours on. Now this one's a blue coated one. You can see how it's beautifully blended in here. This is my brother's work, I think. But what that is the black from underneath this black with the blue over the top. So the trick is to not totally fill in up to the edges there, and a bit of blending. Now we're going to go for red bears because that's been the demand. You can mix up colours to get the right, sort of exactly the right colour, but funny enough, I found that when you want to go back then and you know, touch up, if you've mixed colours, it's harder. So with the exception of the fur, where I don't really, the colours can vary, I try to use as much of the sort of common paint as I can. So crimson red is the colour I'm going for here. I'll put a little piece about my paints down below. But these were just really cheap off Amazon. You don't need very much. So we get a piece of card. This is a toilet in a tube thing. Just cut. And you just basically just need a little squidge like that. Some reasonably good brushes. I mean, you know, you don't have to pay a huge amount because they do wear out quite quickly. But a little bit of water. A little bit like this. You don't want it too wet, and then we're just painting up to the edges without trying to block in all the colour, and then sort of drag down, sort of drag away from. Like so. Go up for a bit more. Now, when you're doing this, you want to be careful not to get this too dry, because it starts...
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
That's why I'm doing a video, Alexa. Yes, you don't want to try and get it too dry, but if you go too thin, then you can't really see through it. It is about building up layers, so it's almost better to get it thinner than it is wetter, but still, you don't want to be doing this forever. So get some colours on, drag it down, and like I say, go slow, filling in as you go. If you do go over a little bit, you can always come back and put a bit back on. Yeah, and as you're painting, you know, the trick is to let it dry. The temptation to go back over it a few times is quite high. You're much better off once you've put some paint down, letting that bit dry and then going back and dealing with any extra bits you wanted to do. Because once you start to drag the paint, you get an uneven surface and you get bobbles on your paint. So, you know, you've got to be a little careful about over painting the same place over and over. Like I say, it doesn't take long to dry at all, so you're better off coming back and putting another layer on it and just avoiding that temptation. So I will let you watch me paint for a little bit. No, that's a bit wet, so I'll just get a bit off there. Right, so I'm going to stop painting there, and what you'll see is I've got like you can see the red, maybe probably not thick enough there, but that's gone on quite well. And if you compare that to sort of the blue, you'll see that there's another layer to go on, but you can see how you get that kind of mottled look, that sort of depth look. So we'll come back to painting this one a bit more. In the meantime, I'm going to paint this one in a kind of a more block red way, so we have a comparison. When we come to finish, we can compare the two types of painting style. So let's quickly splodge some paint in here. And this one will give you the more childlike approach to it of the 70s, really. I guess when we were kids, this is how we all painted them. We got our blocks of paint. In fact, I might do a video where we I've got some of the original paints. I don't know how good they are, as in how, you know, have they survived the time, but it'd be quite fun, and I certainly have enough Paddingtons to get out the original paint and try and do this. Now with this one, doing it with this sort of paint, it's the exact same paint that I'm using, but as you see, it's becoming a much more vibrant red. The trick in this instance is to keep the paint fairly fluid and keep it moving. If you get a piece wrong, we're going to come back and overpaint it, so that's not the problem. The problem is you can go on and get it reasonably blotchy if you're not careful. I only know this because I've been painting some, I tried doing some of the original ones, particularly that I got the Paddington at the beach, and I painted him this way. Let me have a, yeah, here's my Paddington at the beach, and I went for the more sort of vibrant straight colours. And you do just get this kind of poppy red colour. I think you lose some detail. The other technique definitely draws out all the lines and the shade. But as me and my brother joke, we end up with a Tim Burton kind of very dark gothic bear. Although I have noticed when I'm looking at the pictures of the Paddingtons at various stations that people take photos with, those are done more in the style with the black and then built up, because they definitely have that kind of black lines, you know, grungier, that's not the word, but you know what I mean, a darker look to them. Realistic look is how me and my brother think about it. Yeah, but anyway, we'll get this colour on here. And we'll see. As you can see, I'm a bit more slapdash doing it this way. And I think you wouldn't bother with the card probably. I think you could just go with the colour. And this is where using block colours helps, because you can just add more and not worry about the mix. Had I mixed that red, I'd now be in a world of pain, because I'd be trying to match up paint, which is very difficult to do, and you end up overpainting the whole thing. Okay, now what is interesting about this technique is, of course, one, I can overpaint and get some of the lines back, so that's okay. But there are some, I would describe them as ambiguous bits of the bear. So like these bits here under the wellies, it's difficult to really see from the casts where the coat ends and the welly begins. And the other technique lends itself beautifully to blending these, whereas doing it this way, it's a bit more, you know, you end up drawing the lines with the paint. But you know, what else can you notice? Well, where I splashed some black paint when I was doing the base, you know, hard to cover. That's what I meant about bringing it back to the same, once you've got black on there, bringing it back to a colour. So what I will do with these black spots here, rather than try and paint over them with the blues, I'm going to get a little bit of sandpaper and I'm going to take that black back off before I paint it. Right, so we'll let him dry out. And what can you see? Okay, the difference between the two bears. So this will get another coat of red on him. But as you can see, that'll end up with like a cartoony red, bright colour, very vivid bear when we get to the end of that one. This bear is going to be more like the style that I've been selling. And when I said about drying, by the way, that's dry now. So that you could rework that now. So that's only been a few minutes. So that hood where I didn't think I got enough red on it, I can go over that again now. And this style of painting is about layers. See, slipped, my hand slipped there. Not let that stress me, I can get some black in there. But again, you run the risk, if you put too wet paint on top of the old dry paint, and I haven't given this very long to dry obviously, you do run the risk of scuffing off the undercoat. So you've got to be a little light with your paint. And again, rely on coats building up rather than scrubbing the paint on there. And you can see there the difference straight away. I try and smooth out any ridges of paint. Again, you can always go over them. So there's like a piece, I don't know if you can see it right there on the first pass where it's kind of ridged up. If I go back over that like that and try and catch the elbow a bit more, and see, it disappears really into it. And of course these things, you know, they're not designed to be precise. They're meant to give that distance look. You know, when you look at them on a shelf or something, they're meant to look pretty, right? So yeah, see a little bit along the bottom there, kind of mashing up. Now this is where the danger comes in, right? I can see bits that I don't like, so I start overworking it, and pretty quickly you can tear the undercoat, so you got to be careful. Light brushes, small light, and you're almost getting a dry brush effect there, just to smooth it out. But don't scrub at the paint, otherwise you'll tear the paint. I'll do a little bit on that pocket. And what I'm doing here is what you end up doing, which is, you know, you build up little bits and then you move on to the next bear, and then you build up a little bit on the next one, and it's why they take hours and hours and hours to do each, because you're building up, you're looking at them, you're going again, you're building, and you're never quite happy with them. At some point I have to call it quits and varnish them and put them in the post. Otherwise I'd never ship any. I'd never be happy with them. But you know, you've got to at some point go good enough. But anyway, so there we go, another one of those. So I just went over with a very fine piece of sandpaper, just knock them down a bit, open them up again, ready for paint. You can see you've got to be careful you scratch it, right? I don't care too much, that's going to create like a battered suitcase look. But there you can see the bear, very bright coloured. And if I take the one that's not the black, that gives you that dark colour, right? Things to notice about this one, I haven't gone too mad with the paint coverage, right? It's inconsistent. The lines around there still pretty good, right? So I'll give it another coat, but as in I'll pick out more highlights, blend it in a bit, right? So there we go. I have put a red coat, first coat on every bear. I've done some red ones because there's a bit of a demand for the red ones, and I've done the exact same thing with the blue ones, right? So exactly the same technique, but I've just put blue on. So the next step, and by the way, I haven't really, you know, been madly precise. I've been as precise as I can, but the next step is going to be to go with a black brush and just tidy up some of the bits where I've over painted a bit, just to give myself that good base to work from. Because what we're aiming at, obviously, is, you know, these fairly thin lines. Get that to focus. Fairly thin lines around the main parts, and then this graded look into the shoulders and sort of on the boots and things, and that needs that black line to be quite good. So where I've splashed the red, like there's a good example where I've kind of just blocked it in a bit, I will go with a very thin brush at this layer and re-establish the black. Now the purpose of this is to say, you can see how thin these are, and it's about layers. With acrylics, it's all about layers. I have put another coat of red on this guy, because this one is our like test subject of just painting in block colours, like we used to do back in the 70s, just to do by comparison. And you can see already, same paint, literally off the same palette, and the difference you get. So that's not what we're trying to achieve, although I am going to end up with a 70s painted bear at this rate. Yeah, so next step, re-establish the black lines. So that's that layer of painting done, and you can see the real difference between an original, like just going for it colour there, versus the darker ones we're doing here. Now what we're aiming at, of course, is this sort of look like this. If you take this bear as an example, I've finished the blue coat, and then I've gone back round and I've repainted in all the black lines. Okay, same on the sitting down blue one I'm doing. And again, you don't need to be too accurate here, but what can we notice about this bear, right? So the blue paint isn't quite as smooth as you'd want. the lines aren't perfect, right? There's sort of squares and things there, you know, but it's a good start. Let's take a red one. Let's look at this one here, right? The red's gone on, but it's not very thick. But I've done the same thing, gone round, put the black lines, because it's all about layers. So what we'll do with this one, for example, is now we're going to bring this up, this red up a bit more. We're going to make sure we don't overpaint too much into these black lines that we've re-established. Yep, and we'll get that coat going, and we'll start getting some of the bear colour, the fur colour on them as well, I think. But as you can see, they start to, you know, if you don't try and overpaint them too much at the start, you do get a variation in colour. The blue's gone on more consistently, I would say. The red, that one in particular, look, he's very dark. He's very dark. But it is about layers, so no panic. So I've taken one of those dark bears and I've just gone over it with another layer, making sure to keep the lines intact. As you can see, it starts to come up brighter. It's all about layers. So for these blue ones, I'm going to do a bit of a slightly different technique. Move my workbook out of the way. So I'm going to do a slightly different technique on these, just to get this sort of style in this the way that this is done here. So we're going to use a sponge. So these are just sponges you get for doing washing up, basically. I'll take a piece of it like this, and we take our blue paint, bit on there. I need that to be a little bit more watered down. Not too watery, just enough that it flows. Okay, now this just takes a bit of practice. My brother showed me this and it took me a while to get the hang of it. So we're not trying to over apply the paint, but what this is going to do is add some paint to this, another layer, and start to blend in these hard lines that are here. So dab in a bit of blue, dab off, and then start applying the paint. Now this will overpaint the black lines a little bit, but that's okay. They do come back through when it dries, and what you've got then is a sort of a more blended line. But this one is trial and error. You'll get used to doing this. My first few attempts at this were just terrible. And what I'm trying to do is get it more on the where I want it, as in on the actual coat, and then I'm going to slightly easier as I get towards the shading bits where I don't want quite so much. Now of course this technique's going to put some black and that onto areas you don't want it, like the paws and stuff. Don't get too stressed, that's why we paint in layers. See it getting in there, getting in, and you see that sort of starts to create that. It's got more fill, but the black lines are sort of blended in a bit more. But the same rule applies, you know, you can go over it this multiple times. Don't try and overpaint this so you end up with just a big block of paint, right? That's not what we're after. So we'll start with this one, right? That one's got the fairly heavy black lines. This coat here has not got enough blue on it really, so we're going to dab some more in there. And of course we've always got the option to go back later and apply more black, right? So we can always, if a highlighty bit goes away too much, we can always go and reapply a bit of highlight. I would say if you're reapplying highlight though, you want to get to that, it's kind of like getting down towards less. So you want to be, you know, some of the black lines that you put in later want to be really thin, so you're not creating big heavy shadows, unless you want a big heavy shadow, of course. But yeah, it's better to have really small highlights later, otherwise they stand out too much. It's probably a bit thin there, but you'll get the hang of it as you go. Yeah, so it's a bit thin. You can tell it's a bit thin because it creates bubbles. So dry that out a bit. But the good thing about this technique is it doesn't matter, because you can go back and dab on it a bit more and it fills it in. I found hiding it quite close creates some more firm. If you go out further, you get a more speckled effect. So what we're going to be moving on to after this is, for the stand-up bears, we're going to do their boots, which again will be blue boots, and we'll use this sponge technique on them, and red hats on these guys, I think. So as you can see, nothing particularly clever about that, but it does smooth out a lot of the heavier lines, and we can always come back and have another go at that. So do a few more of those, and then we'll move on to the next bit. So that's them all painted, and in keeping with the idea of we'll be painting one, like just block paint, I've painted his boots blue, just a solid blue. So it's going to be interesting to see how he shows out compared to these. These ones, yep, they've all been dabbled over now with that sponge. You can see the effect's pretty good, right? You end up with, yeah, you've still got the black lines, but the blue's a bit more blocky. Yep. So now we're going to move on. He's got to get red wellies actually. So now we're going to move on. Oh, and I've done these. So I've painted their boots blue. Now, again, not going too heavy, and I'm going to sponge those in. If you look at the reference one though, my brother did a great job of getting dark in there. So we'll see how we do that. We'll explain that. Around the back there. Pretty good, right? So on to the next stage. Okay, so now we're going to paint in the face, in the fur a bit. So to get the fur right, I've got these three colours. I mean, you can pick pretty much any of the browns you want. And you only want to put like a little dab. Now you've got to be careful with the black, because this will overwhelm the other colours. But you're looking to get the first bit of fur to be quite dark, and then we'll work up from there. And if you mix that in, and it's important that we keep this fluid so it flows, you see you get that kind of darkish base brown. That goes on there like that. Right, and then it's a simple case of painting this in. I probably want to add a bit of black back in later to do some of the lining, but this is where you need to paint carefully. So pick a small brush and try not to coat it on. Make sure it stays nice and thin, otherwise you'll take all the detail out the fur. you're looking to keep the lines that are available from the mould. I've noticed in some of the 1970s ones I've got, I think the paint used to be a lot thicker, and they're just like blocks of colour, almost like gloss paint. Whereas this, as long as you keep it nice and moist, it'll retain all of that nice colour. So you want to be going around the top of his nose. Now we're going to come back in a bit and make the nose a lighter colour, so that's not too bad. We're going to paint his nose black. And we're going to do some sort of lighter fur to give it the imagery of actual fur. There's no right way to this. There probably is a right way to do it. I found no consistent way of doing this. It's kind of whatever, because the casts are all a little different. They took the plaster of Paris slightly differently. This is the bit that I find to be tricky, but this way you've got to be really kind of careful handed. You know, if you get a bit over the edge of somewhere, it's not the end of the world. You can go back and do a bit more. Try and get into the corner of his hat there, like that. So we'll come back and do a bit more black on there. This way you want to turn your bears like multiple times. Try and keep the strokes coming towards you where you can. And you achieve that by turning the bear rather than turning your hand. Okay, so we get his fur there. Don't forget the little bit of fur between the buttons. That's a tricky one. Later on, to get the black re-established, I might come back with an actual acrylic pen and do that. Okay, then we've got his hand here. This one's relatively easy to do, the hand. Try and be careful where you put your hand, because you'll find you put your hand onto paint and then you drag that paint onto other stuff. It's not a problem once it's dry, obviously, but at this stage you've got paint on each side of the bear and it's quite easy to get your fingers. As always, it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. You can always paint over, but yeah, it's better that you don't drag paint around at this stage if you can avoid it. Yeah, see, I've just got a little bit of white on there, on the brown on the white rather. I'm not gonna, it's not the end of the world. I'll paint a bit more white on there, but you don't want to be doing too much if you can avoid it. So that's that one. And one last paw left over here. As I say, try and not paint against your brush. Find what your brush wants to do and paint with it. Move the bear rather than trying to force your brush to do something that it doesn't want to do. Right, that's pretty good. So if there's some little bit there, we're going to be going over that with other ones, so that's not so bad. And I'll paint our reference bear, since I've got some spare here. So what's interesting about the reference bear is even though he's got the same kind of paints on now, he feels a lot less finished. I think it's because they haven't got the black on the hat, maybe the black on the case. But he just feels a lot less finished. Yeah, this one feels a lot closer to the end. I mean, I can see the ending point with him. He becomes sellable. As does he. You know, these ones just feel a lot closer once their suitcases are in. They'll be very close to being finished. Yeah, and the jar will bring it to life, of course. Anyway, onwards. So these have all dried out now, and they're looking pretty good actually. I think, you know, this blending's gone well. I'm liking the coat. So he looks good. This is what I find with them actually. You go back and look at each of them and, you know, once they've dried, the difference is quite big. He's really good. Yeah, excellent. So those three are really good. Blue ones. So maybe a bit more red on his boots. Very good though. I like that. I like the way the coats come. I like the blending there. Hasn't got his fur yet. I don't know how I missed him doing fur yesterday. What's this one? So this one's interesting because it's had cracks from the drying process of the actual plaster, and I've been trying to ignore it, but I might need to deal with that. And the way I'll deal with this is to get a bit more plaster in there. You probably won't ever have this problem because I wouldn't send out one like this. I was just painting him because I had him, but I'll probably try and cut, you know, fill that in and then paint over it. But still, the actual paint works pretty good. Bit dark around here, maybe a bit more red. Bring that up, dry brush that up red. Pretty good, right? The coat's great. Wouldn't do much more on that. Obviously going to do the buttons. Start toning down this and getting some colour onto the fur. Paint the suitcase, right? So we've got pretty good. Let's get on and paint. Oh, and this guy, the reference one. So you can see how the blues come up really solid. Colour's gone on. Yeah, I'm going to paint his hat black. Paint his suitcase. So, in pretty good shape. So I'm going to paint some suitcases now. If you look at the reference one, it's a very similar colour to the fur. Right, we have darker at the bottom, lighter at the edges. So that's a bit of dry brushing, and sort of a blackish around where the suitcase joins. And obviously these are quite hard to do. Once you've got black on it, getting these back to this colour is quite hard, but it's doable. So the colour we're looking for then is a darkish colour. As before, you've got to be careful how much black you put on. Just a little dodge of black. And I'm going to go with maybe a mix of these two. So that's quite a nice colour in its own right, to be honest. And we'll go light. See what colour we get here. Yeah, see, I quite like that colour. For what I'm going to do next. Yeah, I think we'll start with that colour. Yep, it's a bit lighter than the fur. So, not too much paint on there. And the same thing goes here, right? We're looking to not overpaint the edges. We're going to go round here. And then drag the paint down. So it's a little thinner at the bottom. In the hopes of getting that kind of darker look at the bottom. I find painting these labels in quite challenging. Mainly because my eyes aren't working very well today. Don't know what that's about, but Once you've picked out the actual shape of the label, though, it gets easier. Now, because there's a line there, and I want a black line there, I paint sort of across it, almost dry brush back towards that line. If you happen to fill in the line, don't worry too much. You can always go around and re-enable it with the black pen, but it's better to not fill it in the first place. So I try to paint across it this way. Now this is definitely, the cases I found are definitely one where you want to put layers. You get that kind of more leathery look if it's layered, as opposed to just block coloured. So don't worry too much about the coverage at this point, we'll come back and do more. Again, moving the bear around rather than the paintbrush if you can. Try to leave that bit of black into to give you that shadow. Try not to fill in all the gaps. So the next thing we want to do is get his nose, start blending his nose in. Now this one is proper art. You're going to have to just get the feel for it. This is what we're looking for, white nose that kind of grades in, and then we're going to add the fur, like streak lines for the fur. So here's a bear, painted brown already. What we need to do is the colours we're after are a really light colour, right? So you need whites and a sort of a grey brown, little bit of brown. Like this. And a little touch of brown. There's my brown. Ooh, I haven't opened this one yet. Okay, a little touch of brown. So, my only advice I can give on this one is use a new brush, because you need a sort of a point on it. Get yourself the sort of the light colour. It's not quite white. But close to it. So that's too dark that I've mixed there. Oops. It's a nice little whitey. Now the trick with this one is you're going for really fine lines, and you're better off having quite a wet mix doing this, and you're going for lots of small strokes. So if I can show you here, so basically you're going for lots of little hairs. You kind of lift your brush as you get to the bottom, turn the bear, right, and the effect you get is that. We can come up from the bottom a little bit and just sort of imagine hairs, really. Make it a little more solid around the nose. We can paint the nose back in black later. But the rest of it, think of it almost as individual hairs. Yes, it creates a solid block around his nose. But further out, what we're going to do later is blend darker brown back in towards the nose. So layers are our friend again here. Don't overpaint it. So there's one. Keep your brush nice and moist. You're better off to put a bit more paint on your brush and then sort of go off on your tissue. Like I say, we're going to build this up in layers. That's the best way to get the blending. So how much you do this, I mean, I've been looking at the Paddington pictures, and he's got more of a kind of like a T shape that runs around his eyes. But I always do this kind of, I don't know, cone thing that just goes around his snout. I guess I could do something a bit cleverer, but I think this seems to work quite well. And like I say, we're going to go with layers, so it's not got to be perfect. It's the effect we're after. So that's him done. Some ones I did earlier. I did our reference bear. You can see he's got his nose done. So I'll put a bit more on him. And then we'll start putting the brown back towards them. So one of the last bits we've got to really do before we just get into tidying up is we're aiming at this sort of hat with the yellow band on it. Now my advice would be, don't paint the band black to start with, which is what we have done, because it's hard to get it back to this nice yellow. We'll get there, but it'll take a few coats. But in the meantime, we want to get a nice red. Now I'm going to start with a darkish red and then bring it back to the bright red around the top. So I'm going to start with a red with quite a bit of black in it. It's still obviously red, but this was going to go under the rim. So blue coats, red hats, that's what we're after. And again, we're relying on our principle of layers. So if this is too dark, then I'm going to lighten it up with a sponge and some layers. As we've got down to this end of the paint, you'll see I'm being much more careful, because although you can go and repaint things, it's much better if you don't have to at this stage. So you're better off taking your time, being careful of your lines. Try not to undo too much of what you've already done. And again, keep this paint fairly wet so that it flows nicely. You're not fighting with the paint. We are going to revert to a sponge in a minute. There we go, so that's the first layer of red undercoat there. I'll do the other one that I'm doing like this. Now, I've only got 2 of these guys, so I think I might give this one the red hat as well. That's what it looks like. See, oh, so a bit careless there. think I want to go to a brighter red for the actual hat. So I'm going to put actual red in. Buy some more of that soon. This is going to take 2 coats. So I'm sponging this just to get rid of the brush strokes, start to make it look more like cloth. I've left them all to dry overnight, and they're in pretty good shape this morning. I mean, these are really close to being able to be shipped out. They look great. We've got to finish off the noses, put the buttons in, you know, a little bit of black lining around here so that they get, you know, looks more like this. A little bit of shading, which we'll show you how to do. And of course, for these guys, I need to put the gold in. Oh, I've got to do the edges of the suitcase as well. But yeah, really close to being good to go. There'll be a bunch of happy Paddington fans, I guess. These ones, I find the bright white doesn't quite pick up all of the shading. So this guy, I gave it a really slight grey undercoat, put some black into where I wanted a bit of shading, a bit of black around the arms and things to sort of do that. So I will do the same with these two guys, and then do their snouts and things. Top up the black on the hat, which is rubbed off as I've been holding them like this. It's sort of rubbed off a bit, but yep, that'll be good as well. So I've just been doing a little bit of tidying up in the meantime. So I've done turn this light on. Yeah, so I've done a bit of yellow around the hats. I've tidied up the orange, which is just careful painting really. A little bit of white there to do. A little bit of white there. So what I'm going to do now is just carry on with the eyes. With the nose. No water in there. So this is a relatively easy thing to do. Again, it's about doing it slowly. So we've got a mix of browns here. These are going to be a bit of a darker brown we're looking for here. So that kind of darker brown there. Like that. So we're going to go dark first, and we can always work back towards light again. So get that reasonably fluid. And then what we're doing is get most of it off the brush. And we're just kind of blending in here. Just creating that look of hair. Just to sort of soften up that quite harsh white snout I did. And I'm actually going to paint back the other way as well. Now, I actually want quite a dark brown, almost black. Nope, not that black. Yeah, quite a dark brown here, because I want to do, if you look at this bear, you can sort of see round up under the hat and bits like that, there are quite dark things. So in here, really. Now I'm doing this as more of a wash, which means it's a lot of water. And it'll run into the spaces and create that shadow. And again, looking at this, you know, it's layers. It's don't do too. Oh, look at that, got that on the collar. Good thing is at this point it just wipes off if you get it with your finger. Yeah, I'm looking to not over paint. Get the layers in. Little strokes like this. Little strokes. We'll add a couple up there. Just go across the top of that hat there where his eyes are. Get a bit dark in there. Actually on the models you can see where the fur is. actually going with a little bit of black into the wet paint there. Let's make that a bit darker. Quite often you don't see what you're doing, as in it doesn't look like the effect until it dries, and then you see it properly. Yeah, I'm going to go a bit darker. I'm going to do his hands. Again, you're not looking to block colour this, you're just creating little strokes. Give that feeling of fur. I'm going to go dark here and run up underneath his, close to that shadowy bit there. Flip him over, do the other hand. Dry brush this one. So dry brush is literally like it sounds. Get paint on it and then drag across the shape. And the reason I'm doing that is on that paw is actually quite a good set of detail. So by going across it with a very, very dry brush with black on it, you'll get, it'll pick out the actual shadow. And that should dry lighter, so that's good. We'll come back and get some more light back into there later. So this is what they start to look like when you start doing the detail. So as soon as their nose and eyes go on, they start to look really good. I've gone around and just, a little bit of brown paint. Again, a thinnish layer, but just tidying up. I think I like the red hats more than the black hat. That looks almost unfinished to me now. But, so the next task's left to do. I did these ones. Painted their little paws. Put black, kind of like a dark brown black into the pajamas there. Again, might need to paint a little bit white back over that. But they start to look pretty good. So really the task left to do now is see how this one's got black round here. So we'll go around there with the black. And then start tidying up little bits. Before I post them out, I tend to go and look, if you look right here, there's a little bit of overpaint there. Come back. Little bit of overpaint there. I'll just really lightly cover that over in a blue. All I need to do is buttons. And the other thing I need to do is see his jar. So he's got black around there. A little bit of black into the edge there. See how it goes into the sort of the edge there. Now he's heavier on the black than this one, but I'll leave that. Black around the jar lid, just to distinguish the jar lid. But really, really close. Really, really close. You can see on the back here around the buttons, I'll do black here around the button to shadow it out. Maybe, and the black, I'll probably put some black back into these, around the edge of these. Tend to do that with a pen though, rather than a pen like this, rather than with paint. But I'll do paint here, I'll do the paint here. So, very close to the end. So I've painted their buttons like a light colour. I'm going to wash over or brush over with a darker colour. So the last thing for me to do now is a bit of black around that hat. So I'm going to do that now. So to do the around the hat, I'll put a bit of black, get it fairly light. I'm using a thin brush and it's almost just draw in. Now you don't want to be doing too much here. If it's light, it comes off like this, right? So that's okay. So basically, if it's a bit washed out, that's fine. I'll put that in there. And then I think I'm going to sponge that back out. Okay, not bad. It does mean I'm going to have to one more thing of gold, I think. Bit of a hard line there. I don't like that, so I'm going to try and wash that off. That's just with water, just a bit of wash there. Yeah, I'll have to go around and make the gold a bit more gold in the middle. But that's good. I've got the black line in there. Let's try and do the top one. Try and do this a bit more accurately. Well, to go and reinstate some of the yellow, but that's okay. Layers, layers, layers. Okay, so we're getting down to real proper final touches here. So you can see here where I painted the black round the hat, it's a bit too much. So what I've done is I've got a bit of the red from the coat. I'm creating a fairly light wash, and then I'm just painting back towards the black line. Nice and thin, nice and watery, and that will just tone down that black. Sometimes it just looks like you're wetting it, but you're actually putting a sort of a thin layer of red back on there, and it just lightens it back up a bit. You don't want to paint right in, leave the black around the line because that was the point. But you can use your finger to give it a bit of a soft edge, or grab a little bit of sponge and just soften that red edge against the black. And you can see there you get a much nicer outcome. If the brush gets dry, that's pretty good. You can use that to just, you know, dry brush a little bit. Now I've got a little bits of blue here. Sorry, bits of red on the blue here. Over here. So I've got little bits of red on the blue here. I'll go back and fix that, especially around here. Again, I'll do the same technique. I'll just get some blue, this native blue, which is why it's quite good not to have mixed this colour, to have used these in the native colours. Is it this blue? I think it's this blue. A little splodge of blue, tiny little splodge of blue. Get it fairly watery. Yeah, don't want to be painting this, you want to be washing this, right? You see the reds there, the reds on the coat, just give it a wash over like that. Don't overdo it. You're just trying to cover, you know, to tone down the red. Again, the colours, you know, the fact that there's multi-colours there, you know, it's not the end of the world. It gives it that kind of slightly older look. But there you go, you can see. Done. Right, that red disappears. Just gives him that, you know, gives that coat that complete colour. And so what I like to do then is just pick up each one, because I've got blue in my hand. I'll just pick up each one, see if I can see anything that needs a bit of blue. If you're only doing one, you don't need to worry about this stage, but these are all pretty good actually. I think I was pretty neat with most of these. Right. Yep, they're all pretty good. Right, so that's the blue done. That's why you don't want to put too much out on the brush, to be honest, out of the tubes, because you could use a lot of paint doing this. So that's all my bears done. So now we're down to the real final pieces. So this bear, for example, I haven't done any. See, his paws have not got. His paws don't have the bottom done. There's no distinction around here. I haven't done any kind of dry brushing on his paws. You know, he's pretty basic. So we want to put some darker colours onto him. Let's pick another one. Same for him, right? So these two, I think, are going to need more work. So look at this guy. Okay, so I haven't done. The sitting down bears haven't had their fur worked on. Everybody else is pretty good to go. Let's have a look at you. Yeah, he just needs. Now he's interesting because you can see up here, if you look into there, around that line there's a bit of white wash gone in there. His hat's kind of not as black as you'd like. So what I'll do with him, and around here it's a bit kind of messy. So what I'll do with him is I'll get some black, or dark brown first into that bit there to create the line. It's a tricky thing now, because you end up painting white and then black and then backwards and forwards. He needs that black line over painting. He needs his spoon doing. He needs his buttons picking out. And I'll do those with a very light grey wash in order to get sort of this effect around the pick out there. Again, you can't overdo it, and the spoon will be like a silvery colour, which there isn't a silver, so I do it with a dark grey. Right, so that's that guy. His fur's pretty good. Same for this guy, a bit more white on his label. If you have any white kicking around, because you've done some work earlier in the day, no, all my white's dried up. But basically, often I'll see tiny little things like that. Tiny little bit of white. Because it's layers, you can do like just trying to tidy up that label. You just do that in real time. And what that does is build up layers. And eventually that will just look completely white, you won't know it. But this is where all the time goes, this last bit of fiddling with black lines and making sure the white looks really white, and you can spend hours and hours doing this. It'll never be correct. So at some point you need to just go, well, I'm going for it. Right, so put that one down. Now I know one of these suitcases needed more, like that one there. See, the white's not complete. So again, I'll just put another little layer on that. And every time you put a layer on, it just gets a little bit brighter, a little bit more solid. Now this is where probably, as I get more experience doing this, I won't paint these labels black. I'll leave them white in the first instance, because then you don't have to build up layer after layer like this. Because in building up these layers, I've overpainted that, so I'm going to have to come out with some brown, and you backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. But he's good. That white's probably as good as it needs to be. I pick up each bear and just look to see if there's a little bit of titivating that needs doing on each one. Again, I'm going to have to come back with a brown on this one. Good enough, a little bit of brown needed. Now he's got, see there, it's got, like, you can see through the label, so I'll just put another bit of white onto that. Check his jam jar. Jam jar's pretty good. Check the next bear. Label's good. Label's good. Okay, so they're all good. Lots of bears. Get these out the door. So that's the end of the painting tutorial, really. I use a very fine black pen to go around these buttons. I obsess, I go round and I put little black lines round them. And then I paint them yellow again, and then I do black lines. I write this on with basically a black Sharpie, really thin line black Sharpie. I fill in the buttons a little bit with the same black line pen. I give him eyes. Oh, I think the orange is a bit spooky, but that is the colour of his eyes. So, yeah, and there you go. So that's that. And then if you compare him to, let's take a black one, a red one, I mean. So this guy's finished the same, right? I've gone around the buttons, filled in there, over painted some of this. Oh, there's a bit of red there. See, I might go back and do that. See how that little spill of red is there? I might just go back and touch that up because I get obsessive. Yep, all done. But if you compare him now to the one that started just with the white plaster, you can see the difference, right? This one has sort of depth and shade to him. This one looks a bit blocky to me. Now, if you go to the original box and then look at the bear, right, he is kind of like that, blocky. But what they do is they take a white pen and they put stitching all around it. So I might do that on him and see if he comes up any different. You know what, I really need to tidy all these shelves up now. They've been taken over by plastic casting. But kind of the end of it. What can I tell you? The summary of that is I start with black because I like the dark Tim Burton-ish finish to it. I don't paint in all the lines, I paint up to them. If you overpaint them a bit, you can go back. The sponging's really good. The trick is to keep your paint really kind of fluid, not to the point where it's watery and it just drifts off, but you know, it flows quite well. Don't rush it, you know, let it dry between coats. Don't be afraid to keep going over it, right? It's you know, if you're not rushed for time and you're trying to do them nice, just keep going over it in little bits, stand it aside, come back, do it again, do it again, do it again. Don't be afraid of using quite weak washes to get the effects you want. And then at the end, just, you know, really detailing it with a black pen liner and, you know, little fine brushes will make an amazing difference. So that's it. I hope this is helpful. If you've got, you want to leave me some comments, leave comments in the comments below. Like and subscribe. If you want me to do another painting video, I can go through just maybe one bear and do it quicker. But that's it. Hope you enjoyed it.